Hi, this is Simon from Tokyo Productions and welcome to another tutorial for Motion 5. And today we're going to be looking at a follow-up to my camera projection tutorial, or rather my fake camera projection tutorial. And we're going to be looking at a more complex method for setting up the effect, and it's going to look something like this. So this still has been very kindly supplied to me by one of my subscribers, Alan Subert. I hope I've pronounced your name right. And as you can see, it's not 16 by 9. Let me just show you my project properties. It's 1920 1080, 24 frames a second, 10 seconds long. So I've got a 1920 project, but my still is 2406 by 1604. So it's not filling the frame. So first of all, we need to come back to the layer and we need to set the scale to 80%, and that will stretch it out to fit left and right. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to call this group reference and I'm going to lock it. Then I'm going to come to Object, New Camera, and I'll switch to 3D, but because that group is locked, it's going to say 2D. So I want to take this original image, I want to right click and I want to make a clone layer. Just momentarily unlock that and drag that out into a new group. And let's lock the reference again. So what we need to do here is to create some guide geometry to allow us to line up our various planes, our two walls, our floor and our ceiling. Now, in the previous tutorial, life was made very simple by the fact that the perspective came from the vanishing point and it extended to the bottom left and the bottom right hand corner. That meant we could use the left and right hand edges of the screen as our pivot point, and that made life very, very easy. But this is much more complicated because these lines don't reach the corners, especially not at the bottom here. So this is why we need to create our geometry. So first of all, I'm going to make another new group, so Object, New Group, and this one I'll make 2D, and I'm going to zoom in to the center of the image. Then I'll come down and select the rectangle tool, and I'll go to Window, Show HUD. I want an outline color of white and a width of 1. And I just want to look at the floor here, the bottom corner, and come up to where the wall meets the ceiling, come across. So I'm defining this back wall very precisely. And then what I want to do is I want to reset this transform, and let's close up the HUD. And then I'll come to the shape, geometry, and I'm going to come down here to edit points, and make sure I've got my overlays turned on, show overlays, and then I'm going to reline these points up to those corners like this, like so. And what I want to do is I want to make a note of these numbers that I've created. In actual fact, I just want to tidy them up as well, makes life a lot easier. So I'm going to set an X value there of -92, a Y value of -51, X -92, Y 82, X 45, Y 82, X 45, and Y -51. And that's just squared it back up again, but our rectangle is definitely in the center of the screen and we don't have to worry about complicated geometry. Okay, so we just need to make a note of those numbers. Don't worry too much about that. I'll keep tabs on that and show you how we're going to use that. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to select that rectangle, come to Object, come down to Replicate. Let's come over to the controls and set the shape to line, and let's switch to 3D. Let's zero out that X start value, and then let's twirl open that end point position controls. Let's zero out the X again. And then I want to increase the Z value, so I'm going to scroll in that number field, scrolling upwards, and you can see that I'm now pushing these rectangles towards me, and I want to have it so that this frontmost rectangle is just hitting the edge of the screen there. So something like that. So that's giving me a reference point of my front plane. Then we need to come back to our camera. Let's move that right up to the top here. Let's also increase those replicator points. Let's go for maybe 25 so we get a better idea of our reference geometry. Now what we need to do is use the camera to line up this reference. I need to turn off this 3D group that I've made. Let's call this corridor projection, and let's just turn it off for the time being because we need to see through to our reference layer, and that's locked and that's 2D and won't be affected by the camera. And we also need to make sure that our replicator group is 3D, so let's right click on that and make that 3D because we need this to change as we move our camera. We'll call this group here guide, just so we know what that is. Okay, now let's come to our camera. What we need to do is we need to adjust the X and Y rotation so that the geometry, the guide, lines up with the perspective lines of our background image. So we're going to use the X and Y rotation. So I'm going to start with the Y rotation. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key so I can make very fine adjustments because it's very tricky otherwise. So as you see, scrolling in that Y number value allows me to rotate that geometry so it's now lining up with the perspective. And then I just need to do the same with the X and bring it down till we're about there. Maybe need to do a little bit more adjustment with the Y. The more accurate you can be with this, the better. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but just to give you the idea. Again, just spend time getting those corners all to line up absolutely perfectly, and it'll make the whole project much easier. Right, now we can turn off the guide, and it's a very good idea at this point to lock the camera. So click the lock switch because this is now set up and we don't want to move that accidentally. Let's turn back on our corridor projection group and let's select the clone layer inside and let's call it floor. And I want to duplicate it 4 times. I could use right click duplicate, but I'm going to hit Command D just to speed things up. Command D, Command D, Command D. I'm going to call this one left, this one right, and this one ceiling. And let's duplicate it one more time because I forgot we need an extra one, and let's call this back. Okay, so let's turn off everything except the floor for the time being and come back to the floor and concentrate on that. I'm going to first of all come down and select the crop tool, and making sure my overlays are turned on, view show overlays, I'm going to crop down till I get to the bottom of the back wall there, and I'll zoom in so we can get this just right. Crop down just to that bottom of the floor there, and then I'm going to switch to the anchor point tool, and I just want to move the anchor point down so it's at exactly the same point, and I'll zoom back out again. Right, and then we want to rotate that element, and I can never remember which way it is, so that's, yes, there we go, it's positive 90, like so. Is it? No, it's negative 90. There you go. And I want to twirl open the scale, and I want to grab the Y value, and I want to increase that until I come back to the bottom of the screen. And as I get towards the bottom of the screen, I'm going to hold down the Alt key just so I can be accurate with it. There you go. Then I'm going to switch off the reference layer, and I'm going to switch back on the guide. And I'm going to come over here and switch to the top view. And I don't know whether you can see now, we've got our back plane here, our camera is here, and our guide, and then we've got this stretched out version of the image. And what we need to do is we need to cancel out the perspective just as we did with the other version. Actually, I said I was going to limit the scale to the edge of the screen. Actually, I'm going to come down to my last marker there on my guide. So increase that Y value till we get to there. There we go. And then what I'm going to do is switch to the distort tool, because what I want to do is I want to cancel out that perspective. And these lines here are the perspective lines of the floor, and I want to now line up with this guide. So I want to bring them in a lot. So I'm going to drag that right in. I'm not going to be terribly accurate about it because I'm going to show you how to fine tune it, because you see the display goes a bit crazy when I try to be too aggressive with it. Okay, that's pretty good. I'm just going to switch back now to the active camera. And you can see that my lines more or less line up, but not quite. So I'm going to come down to the four corner controls here. Let's close up the transform while we do that. I'm going to zero out those two Y values. There, a little bit of a manual error there. So I want to bring the bottom left over like so till it lines up just perfectly, and the same thing with the bottom right. And I might need to just go back and forth between them a couple of times. So there you go, that's now lining up perfectly, and it's actually now in 3D. Probably too early to show you that that's happening, but I've basically cancelled out the perspective distortion on that image plane, and it's actually now a true floor with that image on it. So let's now do the same thing with our left-hand wall. So turn that on. I've turned off the floor. What we want to do here is we want to crop it so that we just take in this left-hand wall. So let's again switch on the crop tool, and let's crop it in like this. Let's zoom in so we can do it very accurately. Switch back to the crop tool and just crop it in to that edge of that guide. And again, let's switch to the anchor point tool and bring that in just so it's sitting on that edge as well. And let's zoom back out again. Now you'll notice that with I'm doing the precise opposite here with the anchor point to what I did in my previous tutorial, where I conveniently hung it off the left hand or the right hand edge of the screen. But this is the way to do it when you've got a much more complicated image like this. Okay, let's come back to the transform, and we need to work out how to rotate it, and we need to rotate it on Y, and I think that's right, yes, 90 degrees on Y. And again, we will come to the scale, and I'm going to scale the X value this time. Scale it up, scale it up. Let's go roughly there. What I need to do is I need to set the X position. Now you remember we had some strange values for our original rectangle guide. So let's set that to -92. And you'll see that just pops it to the edge of the guide. Let's have a look at the floor as well, because I omitted to do that. That value should have been -51 to be absolutely precise. So it's sitting bang on the edge of the guide. Okay, let's turn off the floor, come back to the left-hand edge, and let's again come back to the orthogonal view. Let's come to the right-hand view in this case, and zoom out a bit. Again, we need to make sure that that comes to the edge of this front guide, so let's just gradually increase that till we get there. Again, the Alt key is your friend here. Again, look at those perspective lines. They're shooting off like that, and we need to have them parallel. So again, let's select the distort tool and let's adjust that in. Just this one in. Again, we're just going to be quite rough with it in this view, just to get ourselves in the ballpark, and then let's switch back to the active camera. We're not doing too bad with the top there, that's quite impressive. Again, let's zero out those rogue values there on X. We're only interested in Y in this case. So let's just adjust that bottom left, which is a little bit off. So there we go. That's looking much better. Let's adjust the top, and let's make a little bit of an adjustment to the bottom left as well. You have to go backwards and forwards. It's worth the effort because one will very slightly affect the other, so you just need to be a little bit careful about how that works. Okay, so if I turn on my floor, we've now got two sides of our corridor in true 3D. Okay, let's now do the exact same thing with the right hand wall. So let's turn that on. Let's turn off the other two so as not to confuse ourselves. First of all, let's select the crop tool. Let's make sure our overlays are on. We'll crop in just so we get the right hand wall. We'll zoom right in just to make sure we've got it bang on. We'll switch to the anchor point tool. We'll set that to that edge there. We'll zoom back out again. We'll try and work out the right way to rotate it. So this is -90. Then we will scale it on X. So that's going to be like that. Just do it roughly. We will come to the left-hand view this time. Let's zoom out so we can see what's happening. And we just need to increase that scale just a little bit so we come to our guide there. And again, we want to switch to the distort tool and cancel out this perspective distortion as far as we can without it going too crazy, something like that. Bearing in mind, we're going to fine tune it in the active camera. So, I'm quite badly off on that one, never mind. So let's first of all zero out those two X values. Don't want those. We want to get that top right hand corner up. First of all, we want to actually make sure we're positioned correctly in relation to our guide, and that was 45 pixels on X, just to put us in the correct alignment. Okay, so where were we? We want to increase that top right to that, and bottom right. There we go. That's looking pretty good. Oh no, our top right is not quite right. There we go for our top right. Okay, so that's our left, right and floor. And we now need to do the ceiling. So let's turn those three off. Let's turn the ceiling on. Yeah. Hopefully you're getting the hang of this at this point. I'm going to switch to the crop tool. I'm going to make sure the overlays are on. I'm going to crop to the top of the wall there. I'm going to zoom in. That's very accurate. And let's use the anchor point tool to just set the anchor point at the top of that wall. Let's zoom back out again. Let's work out our X rotation. So that's +90. And then let's scale it on Y this time. And we will scale it so we're more or less at the edge of the screen there. And we need to set this Y value, and that was 82. And that just clears the top of the geometry there. Let's come to, I don't know what we're going to do. We're going to come to the top view. There we go. Oh, let's turn off our reference image at the back there. That's not helping. Again, let's switch to our distort tool. First of all, let's just increase that scale so we hit our guide. And then just bring in our distort tool. Bring in that perspective. There we go. As I say, don't worry too much about that at this point. Switch back to the active camera where we can fine tune it. Zero out the Y values in this case, which we don't want. Let's adjust that top left. That's looking good. Let's adjust the top right, bearing in mind that we're going to have to go backwards and forwards a little bit. And I think that's good. So let's switch the other layers back on again, and we are good. And all we need is our backing. So I'm going to switch that on, and there it is right at the back. Let's move it to the back of that group. And at this point we can turn off our guide. And we can turn off our 3D overlays. And this is in fact our completed corridor. Let's select the camera and duplicate it so we can make an animatable camera. So call that camera animate. And now let's come to the camera properties and let's zero everything out. So I just need to track in a little bit because we've got a little bit of A little bit of excess here on the right that we need to take care of. Let's come into 40 pixels into the scene. And then we can do whatever we want. We can move it on X, and you can see we're getting some really sexy parallax there. We can move it on Y. Again, we can come down close to the floor, come close to the ceiling, and we can push in on Z. What we could do here is we could again just add some lights just for the fun of it. So let's do Object, New Light, turn on the 3D overlays. Let's turn off our animated camera just so we can position these lights. Come to the light properties and let's just move it so it's positioned next to those lights there. And then let's duplicate it. Let's move this one further back in the scene so it's sitting under those lights. And let's do it again, duplicate, and move it to the back of the scene there. And you can see how effective that is. And there you go, that's the whole scene completed. Okay, thanks very much indeed for watching. I hope that's interesting. I shall be doing a further follow-up to my initial tutorial where I'll be looking at a few more projection techniques which will really add value to that particular scene. So thanks very much indeed for watching, and I hope to see you again on the next one.